Hello, I'm just going to be setting up the Raspberry Pi hardware. So first, of course, open up the box, take out the components. These are the heat sinks for the Raspberry Pi. This is the power supply for the Raspberry Pi. Excuse me. Here's the HDMI to micro HDMI cable. Here we have the Raspberry Pi case. Next we have the case fan. And last but not least, we have the Raspberry Pi itself. In addition to the SD card formatter. And then this is also the power supply switch. For this step right here, we need the Raspberry Pi computer, the heat shields, the case, the fan, the heat sinks, the fan, and that should be, and this little diagram right here. This will be helpful to show us where to plug in the fan exactly. So, first things first, take out the Raspberry Pi. Any model Raspberry Pi, like the 2 GB RAM, 4 GB RAM, 8 GB RAM should all work. I've tested it on the 2 GB RAM already, and the application worked fairly well. So here's the box itself. Pretty easy. It just like opens up, press fit. Let's see here. So what we're going to do is we're going to really first and foremost, let's take out the fan. Excuse me. So it is a little bit tricky to get out. Once you see here, we'll be putting the black cable. If you look here, the black cable goes to ground, which is this third pin here, like that. And the red cable goes to the first pin, or pin number 2, excuse me, just like that. So that if we turn it on, it will supply 5 volts to this fan. It will turn on and start blowing air over the Raspberry Pi. And heat temperature control is pretty important, at least for this Raspberry Pi, simply because it's encased in a computer. Excuse me, encased in the case. Encased in the case, yes. As well as working, it's going to be working pretty hard because the application does take a decent amount of processing power. So here we have the 3 heat sinks. The first heat sink is the biggest one, and everything, all this information is enclosed in the kit instructions as well. But just to kind of show what we're doing, taking off the blue label here. I'm going to be placing it on top of the CPU right here. So this will wick away some of the temperature, some of the heat coming off the CPU, and hopefully keeping the computer running a little smoother, a little faster. 4th time's the charm. Okay. So we take this heat shield here, so the heat sink, excuse me, one more time. Place it on top of there. For business. And last but not least, we want to put the small one right here. Here we go. Place it right here. You're going to want to place a fan, if I remember correctly, right here. So it blows cool air onto the top of the Raspberry Pi. So once that's in there, and this works fine, you want to insert it. For the time being, I'm just going to take out the fan pins, just to make this a little easier. Take out the bottom as well. Place it in there. It should just slide in nicely. And you want to put this one here. Once again, 5 volts here. So ground there. 5 volts. Pin number 2. Once that's done, place the top of it here. And here you got it. You have the Raspberry Pi pretty much good to go. When you plug it into the power, air will start blowing to here, keeping the Raspberry Pi nice and cold, and you're ready to start setting up your software. For this next step, I'm going to show you all how to plug in the SD card into a computer to prepare for formatting. So for these steps, we need first of all, we need a desktop or a laptop, something that we can plug in a USB drive into. And then using the little USB dongle provided in the Raspberry Pi, the Canna kit, we'll be taking the SD card that is also provided in the Canna kit, and you want to insert it something like this. Because I have one of my MacBook Airs, I only have these two USB-C ports. So what I'll be doing for this step is taking my adapter, plugging it into here, and then finally inserting it into my laptop like that. Next, I'll be showing you exactly what's going on my screen to install the operating system image onto this SD card right here. We're going to be downloading and installing and formatting the GNU Health Raspberry Pi operating system image onto the SD card. So first, what we need to do is download the GNU Health image from this following link here. I've already downloaded it. The next step is download the Raspberry Pi imager for whatever operating system you have. I have a Mac OS, so I just clicked this link and installed it through there. So once that's installed, you want to go to the Raspberry Pi imager here, choose the operating system. In this case, you want to go to Use Custom and select the GNU Health, the image that you had downloaded here. So you say you want to click Open here, choose SD card. It should show up as a mass storage device, the 32 gigabytes from the Canna kit. And once that's done, you want to choose it here and then just click Write. Since I already have it read into the SD card here, I personally will not click Write. But once you do that, it will take about, I want to say 30 minutes or so to format the image that you had downloaded onto the SD card here. Once it's downloaded and you had clicked Write and it verifies it, it is all set to plug into the Raspberry Pi, and we'll be going on to this next step soon. For this next portion, we're going to be booting up the Raspberry Pi and connecting all the peripherals. So as you can see here, right now it's turned on. I'm going to turn it off. So we have the power supply, the USB power supply hooked up here to the Pi switch, which then goes to this port here on the Raspberry Pi. We have the HDMI hooked up to the monitor right here and connected to the micro HDMI little female port right here. That there's two ports. You want, in order to get your Raspberry Pi to show up to the monitor, you want to connect it to the port closest to the power supply. So they're right there. It's a little hard to see. It's this one here, not this one. Okay? The next thing is you need a mouse and keyboard. So I have my keyboard right here and I have a USB mouse right here. So I hooked up the USB mouse dongle to one of these USB ports, and I hooked up my keyboard to this little USB port right here. Next, we'll be talking about what exactly we're going to be doing in regards to the monitor here and controlling the Raspberry Pi. The last thing that needs to be done before we start up the Raspberry Pi is place the SD card. You want to take the SD card from the dongle. You want to remove it, nice and easy, here. And you want to insert it to your Raspberry Pi in this little port right here. So as you can see here, what I'm doing is inserting the Raspberry Pi, nice and easy, and you just want to press it in so it fits in firmly. Alright, so I'm going to show what's going to be happening when we finally boot up the Raspberry Pi. So, turning on the Raspberry Pi now. As you can see here, there's some initial terminal text, but you see it's starting to read out. It should be reading in the SD card now. It may take some time for the SD card to be scanned in and read. You'll want there's a welcome to Grub message shown right here. That's quite important. Once you're on here and it says Open SUSE, I'm going to press enter whenever it lets you do so. And it will be saying that it's loading the OpenSUSE Leap 15.2 operating system. This is what the GNU Health application is based on top of. So we just got to give it a bit of time. So these command lines coming out this right here, that's part of the process. So don't worry about that. Might be a little difficult to see here, but this little section here says booting the Linux kernel. So that's what we do want to see. And now it is loading up. It's just going through a bunch of checks and balances to make sure that everything's working out okay. As you can see, it might have flashed a little bit too fast, but it said, "Welcome to the OpenSUSE Leap 15.2 beta." So we want to see green lights on everything, preferably. Okay. And since we're not connected to the internet, there are a few jobs that may rely on the network. So if it does take a little longer for those, that's okay. Just to realize that the network isn't available. Okay. So it's going to ask for, here I believe the login here. So if we zoom in, it's going to be the GNU Health application. So the password for this is freedom in all lowercase. FREEDOM, all lowercase. So here we go. It should log us in. We have the operating system screen here. It's okay, we can just exit this. There's some useful documentation here, but we won't be getting into that. Primarily though, what we want is the GNU application here. So, the profile that we're looking at is the local Raspberry Pi server. This is going to say install and download all of our information onto the SD card included in a Raspberry Pi right here. Everything's local, we don't need a network, everything should be working there. So we say host is GH, database is health36rpi, the username is admin. So we connect here, and it should be prompting us for a password next. So as you can see here, the password here, it's a little difficult to find, but it should be lowercase everything, GNU SOLIDARIO, GNU Solidario. Press OK, and it should be booting us up. And as you can see here, we are now in the GNU Health application. Hopefully this is a useful tutorial. It's pretty much a proof of concept saying that we can install electronic health record systems in low resource clinics without the need for any internet access. Thank you for your time.